exactly what it was. It was a rare treat opportunity that was sort of handed to me. I wasn't the first DP on hand. That was Mike Berlucci, and he was noting that the show was going to require a lot of visual prep, and so he encouraged producers to bring on a second, and that's where I came in. And I was like, wow, you're going to share this awesome show with someone? That's fantastic, because every episode was different than the previous one, and there was just so much to play with.
Hi, I am Chad Anderson of Filmmaker U, filling in for Gordon Burkell. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more on filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we have the pleasure to interview a talented film professional, and this week, we are delighted to be joined by cinematographer Tari Segal, whose work includes This Is 40, Chicago Fire, FBI, Rock of Ages, and Law and Order True Crime. Her most recent work includes the surreal new show Interior Chinatown. Welcome to the show, Tari. I am delighted to be here. I have fallen madly in love with this show, and I do definitely want to talk to you about so many of the amazing things that happens. But first, I really want to ask. I watched this show, and it's kind of a playground of so many cinematography options, so many things you can do, and so many great things. Is this like a candy store for you, where you get to do all these different kind of modalities of filmmaking?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was a rare treat, and it was this opportunity that was sort of handed to me. I wasn't the first DP on hand. That was Mike Berlucci, and he was noting that the show was going to require a lot of visual prep, and so he encouraged producers to bring on a second, and that's where I came in. And I was like, wow, you're going to share this awesome show with someone? That's fantastic, because every episode was different than the previous one, and there was just so much to play with.
Yeah, I remember I was watching the first episode with my children. I watched it with my daughter, and I remember I just some of the times I didn't even know if we were still in the show or if it went to commercial or it went to something else. I'm like, wait, did something happen? And there's so many different, there's stuff that seems like, 80s action film, and stuff that seems like
Mhm.
obviously the police crime drama, and obviously something that seems like a real, modern 21st century drama. It's kind of it's so all over the place, and it was tough for my children to keep up with, but it was also tough for me to keep up with. Like, I'm like, wait, am I still here? What's happening? Do we go to something else? And is this a man? It's so fantastic in that capacity, and I get delight out of it. I want to talk clearly about there's the Willis story, and then there's the fictitious, cop drama show. There's an obviously huge lighting stylistic change
Mhm.
between those two universes, between those two worlds. Was this a challenge to do, and is it an ongoing challenge? Because there's even some scenes in later episodes where it feels the lighting feels split screen between where Willis is on one side and the cop drama is happening on the other side. It's this bold transition between these two. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was something that was very important to achieve to get the story across. And we were all worried too when we were shooting it, like, oh, are people going to understand this? And we just leaned into the styles that we were creating as much as possible, and just thought at least it'll be a fun ride for people. And I think if you watch the first episode, you really need to see the second episode, so it all starts to make more sense, because that's when it goes into the fictitious story, the black and white show, the fictitious show. Yes, it was very challenging to keep track of everything that needed to happen, and a lot of it was done in camera and within a scene, and so there was a lot of planning involved, and it could be a time-consuming thing. But we designed a lot of the sets and stages with LED lights. Even the practicals were LED, so that we could change the color temperature and change the lighting cues a lot easier than if they were, your standard bulbs.
I sort of got into VFX by accident. I always had a technical interest in photography and especially as it relates to movie making. There's something magical about the ability to believe something is happening when it isn't. So I went as a live action producer into a company called Bob Abel and Associates. Then I would have to, have a meeting about how do we do this effect that's in this commercial, and I never got the straight answer I was looking for. I have camera knowledge, so it's like, since it's kind of ambiguous, why don't I just grab a camera and we'll try it out. You have to figure out what tells the story and use every trick in the book to solve your problem. I am Rob Legato, and this is my course on visual effects.
So you came from a background of, you worked on Law and Order True Crime, you worked on Chicago Fire, you worked on these other shows that are these police procedural shows that have this thing. And this is sort of taking that as an homage or a parody of that, taking those elements. Were you thinking about those other programs you've worked on that are police or crime or fire department or drama, procedurals in your work, that you were thinking of like, oh, how do I approach this to make this, to really emphasize this kind of as a cartoon version of it kind of thing?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in the Dick Wolf world, coming in to their machine as an operator, as a second unit DP, and then eventually shooting FBI, which was one of their first New York shows here. And when they first called me in and were asking me about, well, how are we going to show off this black and white show? We want to reference Law and Order. And it was really funny because they're talking about all this light and all this color, and I was like, that's not the Dick Wolf world, though. I understand the police procedural bit, and what it was I think in their heads it was just a bunch of styles from a bunch of different types of shows. As- in particular, CSI has a bit more color and a lot more dramatic lighting than your Dick Wolf shows. But one thing that they all had in common was a similar way of shooting coverage. So we combined those sorts of things. So everyone would get a backlight, regardless of lighting continuity. So they'd get a backlight, they'd get a backlight. That was kind of the charm of it. The eye lines were much closer together, more stacked, heavy, dirty overs, very studio mode. The camera always kind of moving, except that's a very CSI style of always just
Kind of CSI Verite.
exactly. And the more we kind of threw in all these things that were just known about watching these shows, the easier it was to transition to the Willis world, which was more Wong Kar-wai, handheld, practical lighting, because they were so different from one another that we had to go to extremes.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, when I first saw the black and white logo come up, and I went, okay,
Hmm.
they're doing Dick Wolf. They're doing
Yeah,
this kind of show there, and then all of a sudden I was like, all bets are off. This is a totally surreal show, and you have to
yeah,
keep
yeah.
up with it. And again, like I said, the first episode, I was like, wait, I can't keep track of where I am right now. But the second episode, I went, okay, the lights are changing. Got it. That's my cue. And it is like the lighting and the set design and the look of the show, the cinematography particularly. Is partially, it feels like a character in the show. It feels like another person in the show that's telling you, hey, okay, now we're going into this modality, which is really kind of fascinating. Did you have a lot of reshoots on this? Were there a lot of reshoots during the production of this?
No, there weren't. The only reshoots were for the first episode. And I think they went back and reshot the opening of Green and Turner entering the restaurant, because afterwards they realized we just needed to, do it in a stronger, more visual way. And so, the way it happens on that episode is a lot stronger than what we do later. But I think they just needed to really kind of massage that bit. But that's the only thing we really reshot. Yeah, the world of the police procedural is really funny, and there's a lot of Easter eggs in there if you are aware. The background is a little bit more fake as opposed to the Willis world. In Willis world we use a lot more realistic background, stuff like that.
Sure.
And even in the outskirts of like the police station, in episode 2, when Willis is trying to get into that door, um we had like background resetting themselves in the background of our shots. So you'll see them just walking and then they'll turn around in place and head back. And it was kind of an homage to like in the back where the AD's like, go back, those little
Mhm.
things.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, in episode 4, I will confess that growing up, I was a diehard Enter the Dragon fan. My brother and I would watch it every weekend. I
Hmm.
mean, for about a year, it was just show every friend in our neighborhood a copy of Enter the Dragon that we had on VHS. Episode 4 is there's a moment in there, to spoil, there's a moment in there that's a hardcore homage to Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
Whose idea was that, and how much did you go into that knowing about Enter the Dragon, and how much did you have to research to really? I mean, you hit it exactly those points
Yeah.
well.
I mean, the thing about Enter the Dragon is I used to watch that with my dad growing up. So I was very familiar with, Bruce Lee and his movies and stuff. You read the scripts and Charles Yu, the showrunner, he really gives the directors a lot of room to add things and interpret things. In this particular case, John Lee, my director, and the producing director of the show, he's like, I feel like it should be, you know that scene in Into the Dragon? I was like, oh my God, I do. He goes, we should do that. And we basically, watched these clips and movies that, we would research on YouTube and said, let's do that one. Because these were iconic things that, he remembered as well. And so he was just listing them. And we tried to hit off as many as we could and recreate them.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching. I was like, yeah, I know the
Hmm.
exact scene where he tastes his own blood, and I mean,
Yeah.
it was like 100%. I'm like, yeah, you didn't even. Yeah, I was like, are they
And
doing it
the mirror one, the mirror
in the
with the
mirror and the
phases.
yeah? And I was
Yeah.
like, are they doing it in the dragon? And then like 10 seconds later, I'm like, nope, they're definitely doing the dragon. There's no way they're not doing it in the dragon. Like completely, an improv of that. So you spoke about this idea of Charles, you giving a lot of freedom to the directors. You work with a number of different directors on each episode.
Hmm.
There's I think a list of different directors on there. In terms of your work as cinematographer, how much freedom are you given from the director to say, hey, I want to, I think this would be better with this lens, or I think this would be better from this angle, or can we include this, or should we make this more handheld, or should we make this more close up, or how much room were you given?
Well, that really varies on a project, and in this one in particular, I had a lot of say on this, and I think that it the scripts are written with a lot of visual detail in it and a lot of clues for us to interpret. So the directors really leaned on us to kind of just take care of that part of it, and suggest what needed to be done because being rotating on the show and knowing every single episode really well, it was, we were a good resource for the directors to be like, well, actually, this would be handheld and this would be studio. So it was really kind of creating these worlds with Mike and following our own rules, and then letting each other know when we broke them. We were always sharing notes about things we were doing, and we just had a fun time. And I think I was never really told I couldn't do anything. I think they were very much wanting me to just push it as far as I could and always encouraging me to like, go even deeper, go further.
That's
So
great.
I would just bring things to the table and I'd be like, what about this? And the directors would love it. So it was a collaborative experience to do whatever I thought was right to effectively like achieve the style that was written in the script. I mean, in the script, there's scene descriptions that would just say the light came and the light goes, and you'd ask in meaning, so what does that mean? How do you see that? And they're like, we don't know. How would you do it? So it
Yeah,
was kind of like that. Yeah.
I feel like you could go into work every day and almost make up something you haven't done before and be like,
Yeah.
hey, can we shoot this next scene like a sitcom? Because there's so many different styles of storytelling, whether it be the cop drama, whether it be the kung fu
Hmm.
action film, whether it be the difference between 21st century Dick Wolf and 80s Dick Wolf. And so you have
Yes.
some of those in there, some of those other styles there. When you saw in episodes of these flashback scenes that you're replicating these older episodes. There's a couple of things that you do with some of the flashback scenes of Willis's family that feels very kind of old world style, and then you have some earlier episodes of like the 80s cop drama show, your Hill Street Blues or whatever it be. Just has a slightly different look to it, whether it be camera angle or just, you know, composition or just lighting in general. It's, you know, it's more even lighting as you go to those older episodes. How much fun was that to do? Because it sounds like it's, again, I feel like it's a lot of playfulness. But how did you approach doing those flashback episodes, for example?
So, you know, when given a lot of creative freedom, it's both good and bad, because sometimes you're just like, well, there's just way too many options. And sometimes I work better with some limitation of sorts. And so for me, it was really about, you know, I was always keeping in mind the experience of the audience, and relating it to Willis. So when you were watching a show, and how to make it, you know, so that you kind of remember what it was like watching those old cop shows and the 4:3. And I was like, you know, and by the way, you know, changing all these aspect ratios wasn't something that I think, you know, everyone was like understood from the get-go, but they were very supportive as we went on. And I said, well, this really should, like, when you go full screen, we should really show this 4:3, because that's how it was and that's how it felt, and everything should come kind of from that. And the flashbacks, you know, flashbacks are very, you're getting, you know, memories are sort of, you know, fractal and partial, and you're not always getting a full picture. And so I wanted to recreate some of that and also keep it in a square world, because it would have been more period like to and so there's these flashbacks that happen, and I wanted to do something that was similar to a lens baby, but more of a deaconizer, where you know, aberrations and colors would kind of split a bit more. And so Panavision helped me out, because I was just kind of describing it to them, to their lens guru, and he suggested this Witt lens. And what it does, it's kind of like reverse diopters and stuff. So everything feels like it's moving to this point of focus in a way that's different than the lens baby. And it kind of like, it just had an effect through testing that felt more like a memory. And I was like, that's it. So it was really fun to just like, you know, question things and try and put some meaning or something behind it that could give it, you know, some guidance.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
So a lot of those things, I was curious about that, because a lot of those things like the chromatic aberrations and the kind of, you know, it feels anamorphic, but a lot of those kind of crazy lenses, that was done in camera and not in post.
Correct.
That's kind of the thing. That's, you know.
Yeah, everything was done in camera on the show. And we finessed the color correction, you know, in post with our colorists, but we had LUTs that were pretty close to what we wanted on the day. But sometimes there were transitions where he was able to transition between the one LUT to the next. But we tried to do as much practical as we could. Yeah,
that's bold. That's very bold, because then you know you're living with that, you know. So it's a lot of tough decisions. I want to ask you, because you've worked on This Is 40 and you worked on Rock of Ages, so you've worked on a number of films, and you've worked on some, like I said, like Chicago Fire and Law and Order and FBI. So you've worked on some episodic TV that is, I know the pacing is a lot different. This feels like, you know, to cut through pages a day. Was this more like film or more like TV in terms of the pacing? Did you have time to change your mind? Film usually goes a little bit slower and you have more time to redesign. Procedurals are lightning fast and you have to make the day.
This was definitely more like procedural making the day TV. I mean, you just never felt like you had enough time, and you really um, had to, you wanted to leave some spontaneousness for magic on the day. And once you made a decision, you had to go with it and just kind of run with it. And so the prep was really intense. The prep is where a lot of initial ideas came up, but even then you had like 8 days of prep, and then you just, kind of fall into this episode, and before you know it's over. And I think one of the more demanding episodes was 8 for me, because we're prepping all these different, commercial spots in the same amount of time as every episode. It all happened very quickly, and you really had to be on it. There was no time for catastrophe.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that
Yeah,
gives the almost the real, crime drama procedural pace,
yeah,
the real sense of that. I do
yeah.
want to talk about, most importantly, my favorite, I think, of the entire series, which I had to watch like 3 times. In Willis Investigation, episode 4, the Willis Investigation dream sequence, where he's going into these different locations, and
Right.
he's dealing with Lana, and then Lana's not there, and then he's in a hallway, and then he's in, and it's just and it's really, shallow focus right on Willis's
Yeah.
face, and he keeps waking up, and he's with the painted faces, and he's all over the place. How challenging was that to coordinate in terms of timing, in terms of getting all of that? Because the scene takes place in like what feels like 37 different locations, all in
Yeah.
one sequence. There, what was doing that like?
I felt like it was mapped out pretty simply from the beginning. When we first start to prep, that episode in particular, I think the first day is like, let's just talk about that sequence and get it out of the way. Go, this is where he's going. And then, we're working on that throughout the prep. But I think from the get-go, we kind of knew where it was. So, when you're working in TV as well, I think, especially as a DP, you your mind kind of works with the script and a pace, and it's usually like you're kind of already in this machine that's going, and you kind of tag certain things, and you kind of it sort of just kind of works when you plan it. And you're just like, oh, I'm in this, and I know that this is going to go to here. It's just sort of such a fast pace machine that you're kind of already on this ride, and so you're already like working at this high speed. And so it
Sure.
was actually pretty easy once you're in it. I mean, if I had started with that episode, it would have been a little bit more challenging, but once you're in it, that's kind of it was an easy thing to put together.
Yeah, it is a high paced scene though. It is miraculous to watch. And I was like, I don't even know where I am right now. It was it's impressive. It was an
Yeah,
impressive.
I don't even remember being too like I don't remember being too concerned about that. I remember those scenes being really fun, and having a great sense of direction as well. I think it's easier to just confidently go into that, because it is a directional thing, because
Yeah.
he was always going this way and coming in this way. And so I think when you know which way you want to move the world, it made that a lot easier. Um, and then the lighting style was just it was just so much fun. I think that took a lot of the stress out, because it was
Yeah.
just like, we're just going to try this thing and do it, and it's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a very bold show, and there's a lot of bold decisions that are just made,
Yeah, yeah.
trying crazy
I'm
things.
sure if I wrote a diary or something on that day, I would have been like, I just had so much coffee. I was panicking all the time. I was just going to my gaffer and going, no, I need a different color. Let's look at something else. But in retrospect, it felt like it came together really
It came together
easily.
beautifully. It's a great scene. I do want to ask you about your kind of on a bit more personal level, but still professional. You came from intern to camera assist to second unit camera, those kind of things, and now you're lead DP. on different shows and different things. What we kind of strive to kind of, educate people who watch the show and who are involved in the show. What kind of thing do you think was most important for you as you, elevated to your status now, in terms of what advice would you give, or what kind of thoughts would you give about doing this work and getting involved in this work of cinematography? What really helped you, and what was really the skill set you had in the back of your head?
Well, before I delve into that, I will say that I do think for a lot of people, it is really easy to create a beautiful picture. I think beautiful pictures can be a dime a dozen, to be honest, and it's easy to craft that too from a digital perspective when you have a monitor that's accurately depicting what you're capturing. So I think these days you do have to set yourself apart from just being able to create pretty pictures. Um, for me, I had a love of cinematography as a storytelling tool. It's what I studied when I was at Columbia College in Chicago in my
Mhm.
undergrad, and we would study um, third world country films and French New Wave. And I think in French New Wave and German Expressionism, I was just blown away. I became a
Mhm.
huge lover of Godard and telling stories like that. And whenever we shot our student films, we'd get so excited, like, wow, it looks like a real Hollywood film. And our teacher would just rip us apart and say, what was the point of it, though? And I think
Yeah.
when you have those roots of using the camera to tell the story, it was really helpful. And I got hooked up with Faden Papamichael on Sideways, who became a great mentor of mine. He just did A Complete Unknown with a
Yeah.
gaffer who I also recently used. And he's always been a big supporter of mine. But the reason why he became a great mentor of mine is because we both had a love of French New Wave. Um,
Mm.
and I think we were able to connect in that way over the years. And staying true to that idea of a love for story through cinematography, I think, um, and there's a lot of humbleness in it, but I think that's the thing for me that kept me going, because perseverance is worth its weight in gold in this industry.
Sure.
You can't compare your career to someone else. Everyone has their own way. So I think just staying true to that love and respect for cinema was really something that helped me out.
That's really important. That's really important. I think it's
Which is
interesting.
funny because then I do police procedurals and TV, and I never thought I was going to do TV. So I
Yeah.
was shooting whatever I could, and then a friend brought me on and said, "Well, you can shoot second unit if you come and operate for me on TV and stuff like that." And I was
Sure.
like, "Well, it's a great opportunity to do something bigger." And so when the opportunity came to do FBI and be the lead DP on it, they are like, we want you to bring your thing to it from your indie world. And I got to bring prime lenses to a police procedural and the single camera look, and they loved it. And a lot of their shows now have alternating DPs um,
Yeah.
because of the success of that. So, you always are trying to bring that responsibility of storytelling into whatever job you get.
Yeah, I mean, it is the, the evolution of TV as a medium is really,
Hmm.
you look at shows that are coming out today that are just more and more like films, just more and more,
Yeah.
single camera, prime lenses, those kind of ideas, and the structure of it is really, they're trying to catch up to film in terms of the dramatic elements and make it less, formulaic. Even in the
They are. It's different too because they're striving for an elevated TV look, but you are getting something at a much faster pace. And
Sure.
so to not everyone I think can shoot TV as successfully. Um, like going from film to TV, they really get like, oh, awakening of what the
Yeah.
schedule is. And I think having a master of that is very helpful for creating an elevated look, because you have to work so quickly on the
Hmm.
set to make those days. You don't have all the luxury of all of these reshoots and endless supplies of resources to get it done.
Yeah, it's like a high-speed locomotion. Yeah.
It is. It is. You have delivery dates. You have actors who have a certain schedule they have to adhere to. It's a different form of filmmaking, and so you have to be able to carve out those challenges and still work within them.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you one more question, Tari. Do you have a guilty pleasure, something that you watch for fun, maybe at the end of the day to unplug, something that's a little silly, or just fun that you don't take too seriously, that just relaxes you or makes you have a good time?
Yeah, I could turn on an episode of Bob's Burgers any time of the day, any day of the week. It's my it's definitely my go-to. Um, yeah, that show is comfort for me.
Wow, good deal.
Yeah,
Excellent. That's a good answer.
yeah.
That's going to be it for us this week. Thank you so much again, Tari. The rest of you can check us out at filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I am Chad Anderson. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And thank you again, Tari. It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to future works that you do.